And welcome to All Business Media. My name is Rick Delgado, and I'm your host. And joining us once again is our friend Kathie CondonIn. She's the owner of Condon Medical Legal Consultants out of Birmingham, Alabama. You can reach out to her at her website, cmlc.co, or give her a call directly at 205-908-3289. And Kathie, once again, welcome back, and how are you?
Great, thank you. I'm doing great. I've managed to miss the flu so far, knock on wood.
You can't talk about that stuff because you're jinxing us now.
Oh, no, no.
Oh, now I'm depressed. No, okay, we'll get past it.
Okay.
There's no flu here. I didn't even say the word flu.
No.
I can't even spell the word flu. So let's talk about you, though.
Okay.
Okay. For people that may not be familiar with you, I know we've talked a bunch. Mm-hmm. We've done a few shows together already. But give everybody a little bit of your background. Tell us about exactly what you do as the owner of Condon Medical Legal Consultants.
Well, to begin with, I'm a registered nurse. I have a master's degree in nursing. Mm-hmm. And in 1999, I started doing legal nurse consulting. And I'm sort of, think of me as the conduit between the attorneys and the medical world. Attorneys don't always understand what the medical world is, especially when we're charting.
Right.
And so I help interpret all that information into something that they can use to help their client. Like I said, I've been doing it since 1999.
Right. And
I enjoy it. It's a great experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you know what? I kind of, when you say, you know, people don't understand what you're doing when you're charting, I almost think of you as I equate that to getting an accountant. Because let's face it, you know, you take a look at some tax documents, right? And you're just like, I need help.
Right.
And that's what you hire an accountant to kind of figure everything out for you. So,
yes.
So that's kind of your role, so to speak.
Right, right. And I do it for all different types of cases. Mm-hmm. The major cases are medical malpractice and personal injury cases. Right. And then I've done a lot of criminal cases, which has been very interesting. Then you can do toxic tort, product liability. And when we talk product liability, we're not just talking, you know, like you hear about the transvaginal mesh and the the blood clot filter that they put in to large veins. But we're also talking medication like metformin. There are some antidepressants that caused a lot more problems than were expected. So there's a lot of different things. I also help with environmental cases, like if there's an oil spill and people get sick because oil has seeped into the water table. Right. Okay, that's where I can extrapolate all that information out of the patient's chart to show how the oil spill did affect all these different people. Right,
and it affects their health. And of course, you know, from there, you know, that's where somebody decides, you know what, I've been harmed, I want to file a lawsuit. They contact an attorney, and in turn, that attorney goes, okay, here's all their stuff, I don't know what this means, and they call Kathie CondonIn. Right.
A lot of times the attorney will take all that medical information and they'll flip through it and read it, but they really don't know if they have a case or not.
Right.
So they'll call me up and say, look, I'm going to send you this case. Can you just review it and then call me back and tell me what you think? Do we have a case? Should I even pursue this? Right. Or should I just leave it alone? Because what people don't understand is like a med mal lawsuit, it costs a lot of money for the attorney, and which is passed on to the client.
Well, yeah, of course.
And so, you know, he doesn't want the client to spend a lot of money if I'm looking at it and think you don't have a chance to get this right. So a lot of times I'm just there to review what medical records they've got already.
Right, because a lot of times with cases like that, like malpractice, like you said, from what I understand, the attorneys, they're working off a percentage.
Exactly.
So they need to win that case to actually get paid.
Right.
So it behooves them to contact someone like yourself and say, you know what, see if this is going to be worth my time and effort, because they don't want to go and invest all this time and money, you know, paying you, paying other experts, paying their law people to come up with a case that invariably, you know, nets them zero.
Yes. because many times I've told an attorney, you know, don't even pursue it, because, and here's why. I don't just tell them don't pursue this case. Right. I give them the reasons why.
Right.
Because when they call their client back, they need to tell the client why they're not going to pursue it.
Right.
But with anything, you know, if you, as the person who's filing the lawsuit, still think you've got a case, take it to another med-mal attorney.
Right.
Don't just, you know, I'm not saying the attorney you took it to originally is not good, but, you know, it's like going to a doctor and him telling you you need some major operations. Go get a second opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the exact same thing you're talking about is, okay, maybe you think you do have a case, but the attorney and after consulting with someone like yourself, they'll be like, well, we really don't see a winning case here. You can, you know, go and see what other people say.
Right.
Now, what if there's one of those cases where, you know, you're like, yeah, there's a case here, but... You know, and it's one of those that could go either way.
Right.
How do you determine your best course of presenting that to the attorney and giving him the materials he needs to make sure that it goes the way that he wants it to go, you know, that they can get a resolution in their favor?
Well, I basically say, okay, here's the strong points of this case.
Right.
And here's what because I have to think in both plaintiff and defense head. I said, and here's what the defense is going to say about it.
Right.
Because, and that comes up more often than not, because I've done a case where a gentleman had his gallbladder out.
Okay.
Thought it was going to be, you know, just a very simple thing. He went back to the room after being in the recovery room an hour, and his wife kept saying, there is something wrong with my husband.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, the nurses didn't listen to him. And they just kept going about their business. Well, what happened was when the doctor did the gallbladder surgery, he nicked a major artery in this guy's abdominal area, and the guy bled out.
Right.
And so the thing of it was, they had also given the man a shot of Demerol about the same time he started going downhill fast. And I said, okay, yeah, he nicked an artery, that's for certain. The nurses didn't do anything because the nurses had charted, they were in the room, they were out of the room. They even charted that the wife kept saying something was wrong.
Right.
But they checked his vital signs and said, no, everything looks okay. Well, you've got to listen to the patient's family. They know the patient better than you.
Right.
And so I said, okay, but the defense is going to come back and say, well, they gave him a shot of Demerol, so he was allergic to Demerol. So I told the attorney, I said, you've got to be prepared for that. But yes, the nurses did not do what they should have done. And I said, unfortunately, I don't know if the guy could have been saved or not. You know, that's not my judgment call.
Right.
But the bottom line is the nurses did not do what they should have done.
Right. Now, how does that shot of Demerol in that particular case, how does that come into play? What did that, because I've never taken Demerol, I've never been given a shot, so I don't know what it does to you.
Well, the guy, suddenly his blood pressure dropped, his pulse went up, and his respiration started or his breathing started slowing down.
Right.
Well, when your blood pressure starts falling, that's a problem. When your pulse is going up, that's your heart trying to compensate for the lack of blood pressure. And, you know, we don't know if it was because he was losing so much blood in his abdomen or if it was the Demerol and an allergic reaction.
Right.
So, you know, the defense is going to use that and say, well, you know, because the defense is the hospital, basically. Right. And they're saying, well, the nurses did what they were supposed to do. Well, no, they really didn't. When the wife kept coming out saying, there's something wrong with my husband, there's something wrong with my husband, and they're just saying, no, ma'am, there's nothing wrong with your husband.
Right.
You know, they should have gone, picked up the phone and called the doctor and said, Mrs. Jones says her husband's not, he's just not right. Here's his vital signs, here's what we've done so far.
Right.
Do you want to come take a look at him? And that would have covered the nurses and the hospital.
Right. Now, so now what part did that Demerol shot play? Was that, because if he's allergic to it, shouldn't they have known that and not given it to him?
You have to remember, a lot of people don't go to the doctor.
Right.
So they don't know what they're allergic to.
Oh, okay.
So the first time you give them something, they may have an allergic reaction to it.
Gotcha.
So that's this gentleman's case. He never was sick a day in his life, really, till he started having the gallbladder problems.
Right. And a gallbladder is supposed to be a kind of a not a big deal operation.
Right, right. But, you know, the doctor admitted that he nicked the artery. I mean, you couldn't deny that at the autopsy report.
Right.
And, but then there's that part. It could have been the Demerol gave him an allergic reaction, and that could have been the ultimate thing that killed him faster than the nicked artery.
Right.
You just don't know. But I wanted the attorney to know, you know, there's two sides to this story.
Right. Now, what about something, I think you mentioned toxic. Mm-hmm. What kind of case would be considered toxic? So what are you talking about in particular?
Well, that's your environmental cases.
Okay,
like
so an environmental case.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So something like the water up in I guess Michigan, or where they're having that water issue. I forget exactly where.
With the lead pipes.
Yeah.
And yeah. That's a toxic issue, and that would be something that they could bring me in to read all these charts and help the attorney pull out the information. Like with lead poisoning, maybe the kids were already exhibiting some bizarre behavior,
right.
But the pediatrician or doctor, whoever was seeing them, just kept putting it off to, well, they're just growing.
Right, they're kids.
Yeah, they're kids, they're just growing. Mm-hmm. So that's where I come in and I say, okay, here's where they started. In this year, on this date, the pediatrician stated, mother says little Johnny's doing X, Y, Z, you know, swinging from the chandelier at night. He won't go to bed, he won't go to sleep. Well, pull out that information, and then not only are they going to sue the city and the state about the lead pipe issue, but they're going to go back and sue the doctors for not, you know, doing a lead test on these children, because it's just a simple finger stick.
Right.
Just poke the finger, take a little bit of blood, and send it to a lab, and they can decide, you know, they can look at the results and see if there's lead in their blood or not.
Right. Now, when you're doing a case like that, okay, maybe it's environmental, there's a toxic issue involved, right? Do other factors come into play that you look for? I mean, especially if it's a person that maybe has a regular history of, you know, going to the doctor for checkups and stuff like that. Do you get all that information so you can say, okay, let's try and see if there's a genesis for when this could have started and other influences, therefore?
Yes, yes, because that is a big part of a lot of cases, especially personal injury cases too. Say you're in a wreck and you start, you get out of the car and you say, oh, my neck, my neck, my neck. So they take you to the emergency room. Emergency room doctor says, well, yeah, you sprained your neck, so, you know, here's a cervical collar, one of those little pillow-looking things.
You mean like the dogs wear?
Yeah, sort of.
I would feel silly. But then again, I wouldn't chew my feet if I had one of those on.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then you're suing the driver of the other car or vehicle or whatever. Well, the thing of it is, when we pull all your records from your doctor, we can go back and say, you started having neck problems, you know, 30 years before you ever had this wreck, so we're not paying for your neck issues now.
Right.
You already had the problem. It could have gotten worse anyway.
Right. So that would be considered an existing condition that you could say, you know what, we're not liable for.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Right. So have there ever been instances where you've had to go to court over something like that and you know, kind of help the attorney out? Because I know a few times when we've spoken, you said, you know, you will sometimes sit in the back of the court, take notes and stuff like that.
Right.
And it just conjures up, you know, especially when you're talking about a bad neck. I think it's the Brady Bunch. When Mr. Brady, you know, it was in court and somebody was claiming that they had an issue with their neck.
Yes.
And he threw the briefcase on the floor, and the person turned their neck real quick.
Right, right.
Did you ever do that?
Yeah. No, I haven't ever gotten into one of those cases. I know.
Because that would be fun.
Yes, because now I have heard of cases where this woman said she injured her back at work.
Okay.
And she was suing her workplace for, you know, it being not conducive to her not hurting her back.
Right.
So anyway, they kept thinking something was funny. So the opposing attorney hired a private investigator, and he followed her. Mm-hmm. And she was supposed to be wearing one of those collar things.
The big cone, yeah.
Yeah. So she got in the car with her 4 kids, drove them to something like Six Flags over Texas or something, and rode not once, not twice, but 3 times one of the roller coasters, in addition to all the other rides she did.
Right.
Well, if you've got a bad back, you don't need to be on a roller coaster or any of those rides, because, you know, they're slinging you around, you're going up and down, and that just adds to the back issues you've got. So when they had all that information, when they got to court, she comes cripping in, you know, with her little collar on, and she just said, I'm so bad. And the attorney put this video up on the screen in front of everybody.
Right.
And he said, can you explain this to us? Can you tell us how you were able to ride all these rides? And you say you have a bad back. Well, with that, she sort of sheepishly looked around the courtroom. They had videotaped the courtroom scene.
Right.
And she said, she leaned over to her attorney and said something, and her attorney stood up and said, Your Honor, we'd like to withdraw our lawsuit against XYZ.
Dang, that's
yeah,
pretty
because
crazy.
she got caught.
Yeah.
She got caught trying to get more money.
She didn't, like, say, that's not me?
Oh, no, she didn't try. I mean, it was her. There was no doubt about it.
Because that's what guilty people do. That's not me.
Yeah.
That's not me. Yeah, it is. No, that's not me. And
yeah.
they'll do it with a straight face.
Right.
That's hilarious, actually. And it's funny, too, that you bring that up, because I don't know if I mentioned this to you. At one point, I saw one of those investigators one day. Mm-hmm. I was at a gym, you know, riding a little stationary bike, doing my thing, reading whatever, listening to whatever. And here's this guy in front of me on a stationary bike. It was a 2-level place with a little cutout, so you can see downstairs. Yeah. And downstairs, he was focused on looking at where all the you know, weight, you know, all the big weights are, you know, the free weights, they call that section. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, you know, the gentleman stops pedaling, and he pulls out this camera. Now, this is going back a few years. You know, these days, you know, you don't really need a big camera. Right. But this guy had this tremendous lens. Pulls it out of his bag like this, and just starts snapping away. And I'm watching, and I'm looking, and I'm like, who is he taking a picture of? And there was a guy doing, you know, very heavy squats. And I'm like, oh, wow, I don't think he's supposed to be doing that right now.
Yeah.
And with that, he just kind of put it away, and then quickly picked up his bag and left.
Well, I have to tell you my own personal story about that. I was injured on a cruise one time.
Oh, really?
And I sued the cruise line. So I went out shopping. I ended up on a walker. Oh. And so I went out shopping one Sunday afternoon. Mm-hmm. Well, it was an ordeal for me, you know, get in the car, go somewhere. Had to get the walker out of the car and then go in the store. Right. Well, when I went in the store, I noticed this couple. It was a man and a woman sort of following close behind me. Okay. And I thought, I didn't think a whole lot about it, but then everywhere I was in the store, they were right there.
You were being followed.
Exactly.
You had a tail.
And then I finished at that store, and then I went down a couple of stores, went in another store. They were there then, too. So I finally finished my shopping. I got
back. This is exciting, by the way.
I got back out to the car. I put my stuff in. I picked my walker up, put it back in the car. And so the next morning, this was on a Sunday, on Monday morning, I called my attorney and I said, look, do you know if the opposing counsel put a private detective on me? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I saw him yesterday. And I said, trust me, there wasn't anything they can use.
Right. Now, is the opposing attorney supposed to alert the other attorney? Because no. I would, like, why would he tell the other guy, by the way, I'm going to be watching your client?
I don't know how my attorney knew that.
Right.
But yeah, they put a private detective on me, and I don't know if it was the man or the woman was the private detective, but it was the two of them.
Right. Wow, that's exciting stuff. You're like a, you know, like a spy.
Well, yeah, but you know, my legal nurse consulting background helped me with that case. Right. My own personal case.
So were you already a consultant at that point?
Yes, I was just doing it part-time though, because I was still clinically active at the hospital. Right. So it was, the legal nurse consulting was a part-time gig at that time, and then I was injured on the cruise, ended up on a walker, and I couldn't go back to the hospital. Right. So that's when I upped my game and just started doing the legal nurse consulting full-time. Right.
Now, in a case like that, is it the, are you looking for, or does it become a dynamic where the hospital is involved because now they have to take care of I don't know how that works. Like, I'm sure you were injured on the cruise, so you're suing the cruise, but does is the hospital now looking at the cruise because the cruise is going to, you know, the cruise people are trying to defend themselves, and I guess that they're going to want to make sure, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure, like, where, if there's a third party involved in something like that.
No,
there's usually not.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was no third party. It was the cruise line.
Right, because from what I understand, for like insurance, in certain parts of insurance, if something happens, yeah, your insurance company will pay you for whatever damage, and then they'll go after, say, you know, if it was a faulty, you know, electrical thing, they'll go after whoever did that to recoup their loss. That's what I mean.
Yeah, and my insurance did go, when we settled the case, my insurance did come back and say, okay, we want this much money from her settlement. Right. Well, my attorney said, no, you're not going to get all that, and he negotiated it down. And I don't think people realize that. When you see these people on TV said, I got $175,000. Right. Well, that doesn't count. I mean, that was the award, but he's got to pay the attorney. He's got to pay any insurance that he used. They're coming back to get part of their share. Right. Then there's all the incidentals that the attorney has, like requesting medical records. Those things are expensive because we're talking, they can be quite voluminous. Right. But, you know, medical records, if you're ordering x-rays that the patient had, if it was an accident, there can be there are people who do accident reconstructions. Right. So, I mean, even some attorneys will charge you for a 15-minute phone call or an hour phone call, plus every page they copy, they're charging you for that. Yeah. So that $175,000 award is not what the person gets. Right. It's not like they can go shopping for a new house. Right. Because after it's all said and done, after everybody's paid, there's probably not much left. No. Even you know, you see the commercials because, you know, all these attorneys run these commercials. Right. Oh, you know, we were able to get so-and-so 35 times more than the insurance was offering to settle with. Right. Yeah. Well, and that just puts more money in the attorney's pocket too. Right. And you know, if they bring me in, they have to pay me, but then I'm the one who sat here and found the parts of the excuse me, of the medical records that will shore up your case. Right. And now in terms of, you know, because you were talking about you know, the reconstruction, that there'll sometimes be a need for reconstructing a crime scene or an accident. Right. Is that something you've ever gotten involved with? Like reconstructing, like, okay, here's what may have gone down in the operating room or in the room with the patient of how this could have happened, so to speak? No, I don't get involved in that. That's somebody else's. You know, there are people who, that is their job, and they have programs that they can diagram everything on and then put it up to show the jury. Right.
Okay, well that's some interesting stuff. Again, we're talking with our guest, Kathie Condon. She's the owner of Condon Medical Legal Consultants out of Birmingham, Alabama. You can find out more about her if you go to her website, cmlc.co. That's cmlc.co, or reach out to her at 205-908-3289. Especially if you're an attorney. If this is, part of your business, slip and falls, right? You get involved with that.
Oh, yes.
Faulty, doctoring. I don't know what it's called. What
well,
is it called?
It's medical malpractice.
Medical malpractice.
Yeah.
Anything like that. Now, what about, again, with say, a slip and fall type of situation, because I joke about it all the time. It's like if I see a patch of ice, I'm like, oh, I'm going to own this building if I fall.
Yeah.
That's really not. I'm not going to fall. Have you run into some case like that where you're actually brought in not by the person who's suing, but by the person who's defending? Because you're trying to figure out, okay, is this person tanking? Are they faking it or not?
Oh yes, I'm hired by both sides, and it just depends on who gets to me first.
Right.
But the bottom line is, I'm not going to go and say, well, I'm for this attorney, so I'm going to skew everything to this attorney. I'm just going to lay the facts out there and tell it like it is.
Right.
Because, say, I don't know if y'all have Walmart up here or not.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, good. But, slip and falls are not uncommon in Walmart.
Right.
Because of, it's superstores and there's somebody dropped their Starbucks in there or something. But you have to stop and think, okay, I've fallen, okay, I'm going to get up.
Right.
But the bottom line is, what do I need to do first? Well, my thing is, get your cell phone out and take pictures. Take a picture of the wet spot or whatever you slipped on.
Right.
See if anybody's around that could help you get up. Take their names and phone numbers, especially if they saw the accident happen. Trouble is, though, a lot of people don't want to get involved.
Right.
So they're not going to give you their name. They may say, "Yeah, I'm Kathie," and that would be the extent of it.
Right. Now, a lot of times too, those stores they have cameras.
Yes. And that's up to the attorney to request the security tape. And one case I read recently in a publication that, as legal nurse consultants, we read is, you need to go to the security department of the store,
right,
and ask them to save that portion of the tape where you slipped and fell. Because otherwise, a lot of these places, they'll do like a 24-hour loop.
Right.
And then after that, everything's erased. And they start over again.
Right. Now, with something like that, with a slip and fall, right, in terms of the medical condition of someone, say they break a bone. Okay, very simple. It's a broken bone. It's easy to tell that the person broke their leg, yes, or what have you. How difficult is that for, when it goes to court? Because of course, lawyers usually at a big store, they've got some high-powered attorneys.
Right.
They can probably pull up all different ways to kind of make it very tough on the person trying to sue them.
Right.
So when you're laying out your medical stuff for the attorneys, is it like, okay, here we go. Here's A, B, C, D. Here's your conclusion. Don't let them, kind of pull you away from this kind of stuff.
Yes, that's how I lay it out to the attorneys. I basically, if I'm doing a written report, I basically say, okay, here's what happened to this lady.
Right.
And here's where they did not meet the standard of care, or they were negligent in what they did, and so the person was injured. And here's what caused the injury, and here's what needs to be done. But I lay it out so the attorneys can go and look at this and say, okay, here's a bullet point, we need to focus on this. And they can assign their paralegals to different points,
okay,
in my report. And then I'm still available, even after I've signed that report and handed it to the attorney.
Right.
I'm still just a phone call away if anybody has questions.
Right. Yeah, because invariably questions will probably come up throughout the course of a trial or, you know, whatever proceedings they set
Right.
up. Now, let me ask you about this, because this is something that kind of piqued my interest a few days ago, and I was like, oh, good, I'm going to ask Kathie about this, because sometimes, you know, everybody knows about the you know, the slip and falls and the medical malpractice and you know, maybe a device going wrong and not reading correctly. Those things are kind of obvious in your world. Yeah. But have there been any cases where it's been like a psychotic type of case where someone was on maybe a psychological medication that caused them to do something that maybe they normally wouldn't do under you know, regular whatever?
Yeah. Yes. In fact, one of my first criminal cases was something like that. The gentleman had a psychotic break,
right,
so to speak, and he ended up killing his wife. He injured his daughter, and then he tried to commit suicide.
Right.
And we went back and pulled all of this guy's medical records, and what we came up with was, and if we hadn't pulled all the records, we would have never found this, but he had been in a car wreck like 8 months before.
Right.
And he had hit his head and blacked out in the car wreck. So that's called a traumatic brain injury, or a TBI. Then after he came home from being in the hospital for that, he was up on his deck, which was about 20 feet up, and he got dizzy, and instead of going back toward the deck, he fell over the railing.
Oh, geez.
So then he falls on his asphalt driveway. So there's another, you know, traumatic brain injury.
Right.
Then he and his wife, it was like in the winter, you know, and in Alabama, our winters are pretty mild as a rule.
Right.
So, you know, they had both had a cold. Well, his wife was they'd been to the doctor, his wife was getting better, but he wasn't. His wife took him back to the doctor, and the doctor said, oh, well, this is just bronchitis, it's just gotten a little worse, here's some more antibiotics, here's cough syrup, and sent him home. Well, at this point in time, the guy in fact, we had emails from his wife that she had written to some friends talking about his behavior.
Right.
And she had noticed there were things at work that were happening that was stressing him out. After he went back to the doctor that second time, got more antibiotics and more cough syrup, he told his daughter, he said, I think I need to go to the hospital, to a mental health clinic. I need to be put in.
Right.
Things are not right. She took him to one of our local hospitals. They put him in the mental health ward. Mm-hmm. Well, he sat there for 24 hours. They had him draw a picture. They looked at medication he was on, and they let him go.
Right.
After 24 hours, the doctor never really saw him. The doctor had a quick note of, he came in, he said he felt this way. Today he says he's fine. We're discharging him.
Right.
Okay, 3 days later, he shoots his wife, tries to shoot his daughter, and commits suicide, or tries to commit suicide. Well, he had that mental break, and you know, I extrapolated all that information out of his medical records to give to the attorney, because we're talking a criminal case here.
Right.
My attorney didn't even know how to order medical records, much less how to read them or what to pull out of them. So I helped them, you know, with his firm with that case. We got the guy committed to a mental hospital, and he ended up, after about 2 years, he was much better. They put him in a halfway house. Of course, they had to go through the judge for all of this. Put him in a halfway house, and he was finally, they let him out because he was so much better. He was back functioning normally.
Right.
But he is still having to check in with a psychiatric doctor every couple of months.
Right. Now, okay, so that was a criminal case. Was there any follow-up, like civil litigation, that the daughter was like, you know what, because this hospital didn't follow, you know, had him draw a picture and stay the night, you know, it was like a sleepover. Did she end up, you know, ever going after, like, the hospital or the doctor there or anything? Well,
actually, that was one thing that I pulled out of all those records, is that they totally did not treat him as they should have. So his attorney turned it over to a medical malpractice attorney.
Okay. Right.
So they pursued that on that end. But I guess I'd done such a good job with all my information that I never heard from the other attorney.
Right.
And I don't know how that case came out. I've often wondered.
Now, have there been other cases where it's a psychotic or psychosis kind of thing where that comes into play, where it's someone's mental health, and you've got to try and document? Because I'm assuming that if you're dealing with, you know, medication and stuff from a, you know, psychiatrist, it's probably going to look a little different, right?
Yes, it does look a little bit different.
Okay.
And you have to sort of look at all the medication they've got them on, and does anything interact with anything else?
Right.
And some of these heavier antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds, react with food sometimes. So you have to look at, okay, does this medication interact with food? What's the guy been eating recently?
Right.
Why did he just seem to lose all the positive things that he had done?
Right. That's kind of a weird part of this is what you're saying is the medication coupled with certain foods can really affect how that medication affects the person taking it.
Right. Right. And, you know, the doctor should counsel the patient on that. The pharmacist should be counseling the patient on that. So, I mean, you know, if they've been counseled and there's great documentation that they've been counseled,
right,
then if the patient goes and eats something that he knows he's not supposed to be eating, taking this medication, that's his fault.
Right. Now, because I know certain medications, they say, okay, you should take this on an empty stomach,
right,
you know, maybe an hour before you eat, that kind of thing. Is that always going to cause a reaction, or it's just a safety that's in there that they've seen some of this stuff in some people?
Yes. It's just the fact they've seen some of this stuff in some people. A lot of medication that you take is better absorbed if your stomach is empty.
Right.
And, okay, so you don't want to take it on an empty stomach. You get up and you eat and then you take it.
Right.
Well, it's not going to be absorbed as well, but it is going to be absorbed, and the doctor may end up having to readjust the medication dosage,
right,
because you're not going to take it on an empty stomach.
Right. Now, what about something like a medical device? I know we've kind of touched on that a very little bit, but you know, you see a lot of these medical devices now. They're offering you can buy it for your home. You know, you can take it home so you can have it to use. You don't always have to go to a doctor for it.
Right.
Are you starting to see any cases like that, or have you dealt with any cases with medical devices?
Well, I've dealt with some cases with medical devices, but they were devices used in the hospital, not some of these home monitoring systems.
Now, what goes into preparing something like that? Because, you know, now, you know, your expertise as a nurse who's been using, say, this device, you know, on these types of patients throughout your career and
right,
in the hospital, but now there's been an instance where maybe it malfunctioned or didn't read something correctly. How do you go about determining that?
Well, first you have to go back, like on a glucose monitor, when you're checking people's blood sugar when they're in the hospital, there are certain tests that we had to run, just tests to document that the machine was calibrated correctly. Right. And then, so we have to go back and request those logs, because the hospital has to keep them for several years before they can destroy them. So we request those logs, and if I can go through and find that, okay, on these subsequent days, nobody tested the monitor. And then it was during this time that Miss Jones had her blood glucose checked, and it was, you know, it was actually 375, but it read on the monitor as 80. Then I can say, okay, they didn't calibrate it. That's why it read wrong.
Right.
So also in a hospital, your biomedical engineers have to check all the equipment at least once a year. And there should be a sticker on your equipment, and it should have the date and the initials of the technician who took it and had it checked.
Right. It's almost like what you see in, what do they call, elevators. You know, it was
Yes.
you know, that little check, and every time I get into an elevator, Kathie, I'll tell you, I look for that. I want to see, okay, when was the last time they checked this thing? I don't want to fall,
Right.
you know, 20
Right.
stories downward.
Yes, yes, and that's you know, that goes into the say it is an elevator.
Right.
That goes into the building's insurance, because you have to have the elevator checked every so often for your insurance to continue to cover your building.
Right.
So if they can find, no, you didn't have this elevator checked in a timely manner, then, you know, and something happens to somebody, whoever owns that building is going to have to pay out big time if the person was injured.
Right. Now, what about cases where, you know, it's a medical case, but maybe it's because the person was, let's say they're in a car accident and an ambulance shows up, or maybe there's an accident in a home and the ambulance shows up and something happens from the point of where, you know, the first responders to the point till they get to the hospital, something goes wrong in there. Have you dealt with any of those cases, and how difficult would something like that be?
No, I haven't dealt with any of those, and I really don't know how difficult that would be, because a lot of it depends on, all the first responders go under guidelines that are set by the state.
Right.
And so no two states are exactly alike. So you have to pull your first responder, you know, rules, policies, and procedures, and read those and then go back and look at what happened and see if the first responders charted, because they have to chart just like nurses do.
Right.
So see if they charted where the problem was, or if they even noticed there was a problem.
Right. Now, what about in the transfer, though? I mean, because you're saying they have to chart everything, right? So say somebody's having a heart palpitations. They're in the ambulance. They get called. They whisk them to the hospital. The hospital takes them in. Based on the information that they're getting from these people, this is what they're expecting.
Right.
What if there's a disconnect there? Who would be at fault?
If there's a disconnect there, the attorneys are going to go after the EMT company and the hospital.
They'll go after both.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, because, well, you know, they go after the deep pockets, and I hate to say that, but that's the truth. And so they're going to go after as many people as they can.
Right. Now, again, we're talking with our guest, Kathie Condon. She is the owner of Condon Medical Legal Consultants. If you're an attorney and you deal with, you know, medical cases such as a slip and fall or malpractice, this is someone you want to reach out to, because she can help kind of decipher all that stuff. And that's essentially what you do as the owner of Condon Medical Legal Consultants. Go to her website, cmlc.co, or give her a call at 205-908-3289. And again, you're the one that kind of swoops in, and it's almost like out of a movie. Boom, here are all the records, Kathie. Good luck. We'll talk to you when it's all together, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And you have to kind of make heads and tails of all the hieroglyphics that are presented to you.
Right. And the other thing too, and I think I've said this to you before, Rick, we're convinced that when you request medical records, the medical records people print everything out, and then we're convinced they take all that bundle of paper and they throw it up in the air, and then it lands on the floor, and then they pick up each piece in whatever order they pick it up in.
Right.
So, you know, that's can sometimes take up a huge chunk of time, because we have to get the records in order so we can tell what went on when.
Right. Yeah, and lining that stuff up chronologically, because I know you explained that even even when it's, you know, set up by the hospital and they give you all that stuff, they don't do that for you. And, and it'll be, you know, and then of course you got to contend with, okay, did someone try to alter a document? Did they go back? And then you got to check. It's like, this looks like, you know, somebody touched it. Is that something you can, you know, you point out to the attorney as well, so they can bring that up as like, okay, and they can use that as part of what they're doing?
When everybody was writing everything, it was easier to spot when somebody was altering the records.
Acting shady, yes.
Yeah, but now with the electronic medical records, there's a document now that we have to request from the hospital so we can track who charted on this patient, what time did they chart, did they come back and rechart something, was it totally different? So not only do we have all this hospital records, we've got all this electronic data over here to check and see, is anybody going back and taking something out? And the thing of it is, the computers are set up to note all that stuff.
Right. Now, do pictures ever come into play when you're putting together a presentation? Like, you know, do you research, okay, say it's a certain type of injury or something like that, and like I said, to kind of help the attorney realize, okay, this is what this means. I can explain it to you. You still might not understand it, so let me include a picture as well to kind of...
Oh, yes. Okay. I do that for my attorneys because sometimes I can talk to you about how something works, but until you actually see a picture of something, you may not really understand what I'm saying.
Right.
So yeah, I do use a lot of pictures, and sometimes in hospitals they do take pictures of the injuries and stuff, so it can be recorded about what they did. So there are those pictures that come into play too, because they are a part of the medical record.
Right. Oh, so pictures do become part of someone's medical record in a hospital.
If the doctor took pictures or they had somebody taking the pictures.
Right.
Now you have to tell the patient that we took pictures or we're going to take pictures, and they have to sign a release for the doctors to take those pictures.
Right.
Unfortunately, there have been cases, and I've only read about them, where doctors and nurses take pictures of who's in the ER or an OR case or something, and it doesn't become a part of the medical records, but they post it on social media.
Ah, okay. That sounds like fun.
Well,
and
you know,
not very ethical.
No, it is not ethical at all. In fact, when if you've heard about the HIPAA rule, which is all that stuff about don't talk about patients and all, because I worked at a university teaching hospital, we had residents and interns. Well, one of the biggest things we had to stop the residents and interns from doing was talking about their patients in the elevators.
Right.
Because they don't have separate elevators for those guys. Everybody rides the same elevators.
Right.
And you could be talking about Miss Jones, who's a real pain in you know what, and Miss Jones's cousin is on the elevator with you.
Right.
But you don't know that.
Right.
So that was a big part of when the HIPAA rules came into effect. And I even said to doctors sometimes, you need to take that conversation elsewhere.
Right.
Or y'all need to stop till you get to a place where you have some privacy.
Right. Now, how important is it, and I'm just wondering because, you know, a lot of times you hear about bedside manner is very important. Is that something where that comes into play in any case, or is it just, you know, it's just they like you to be as you know, nice as possible, you know, when it comes to bedside manner? Well,
they like for you to be as nice as possible, and it would be great. A lot of studies have been done about doctors and bedside manners and medical malpractice cases.
Right.
And one thing they have found is if the doctor would just say, I made a mistake, I'm really sorry,
right,
that would decrease the number of medical malpractice cases. But doctors are not going to do that.
Well, no.
Yeah. So therefore they get sued. obstetricians, because they're delivering babies and things can go wrong with mother, things can go wrong with babies.
Right.
They have the highest rate of medical malpractice cases against them.
Right.
But nurse midwives who practice, they have very few cases, even when there's a bad outcome with the baby or the mother.
Right.
Because they are talking to their patient, they are telling them, keeping them abreast of what's going on. If the baby's in distress, they tell them, this baby's in distress, I've got to turn you over to an obstetrician.
Right.
Well, they turn them over to the doctor, and then if the doctor, you know, just says, oh, there's nothing wrong here, but I'll watch her.
Right.
Well, and then the baby comes out and it's got major problems. They'll sue the doctor, but they won't sue the nurse midwife.
Right.
Because she is there talking to them constantly, keeping them knowing what's going on. And if there's a mistake made, she'll be the first to admit it.
Right. Now, in a case such as, you know, maybe something like that, is the doctor or in a little better position, or the hospital in a little better position? Because, like, look, we just came onto the scene right at the end, kind of thing. Would that be considered like part of their defense? Like, look, we were just brought in at the last moment, kind of thing.
Yes, and they will use that as part of their defense. But then you have to pull in obstetricians and nurses who know fetal monitoring, which is when we listen to the baby's heart rate on a monitor. And you pull those people in to say, well, yeah, the doctor was brought in at the 11th hour here,
right,
and things went bad, but he should have done X, Y, Z. So, you know, even though things were going bad, if that doctor had followed what the other doctors think he should have done, which is called the standard of care, and he didn't follow the standard of care, then, you know, he's up a creek without a paddle, basically.
Basically, that's the way they say it in Birmingham, Alabama.
That's right, they do.
Up a creek without a paddle.
That's right.
Again, our guest is Kathie Condon. She's the owner of Condon Medical Legal Consultants. Now, how quickly can you start working with an attorney that contacts you? What do you need from them? Because, again, you know, if they reach out to you, again, either through your website, cmlc.co, or at your phone number, 205-908-3289, what is the first step, and how quickly can you get the ball rolling? Especially if it's like, you know, all of a sudden, you know, they get heaped upon. It's like, uh-oh, we're not prepared.
Right, and, you know, they need to tell me up front if there's a really quick timeline or not, that they need to get all this medical records reviewed and reports done. But basically, when an attorney contacts me, I do have a contract that I send to them, and I do have a retainer fee.
Right.
And once they sign the contract and I see a check that doesn't bounce, then I start working then.
Right.
But the rule is you don't do any work till you get your retainer fee.
Right. Now, are there certain things you're going to say, okay, you know, check has been received, the retainer's done, what have you? You got those parts out of the way. Are there certain things that you go to the attorney and say, okay, I'm going to need this, I'm going to need this, I'm going to need this, let me get a copy of that kind of thing? Or do you go ahead and order it because you know what you're getting? No, because by this point, the attorney should have the medical records in hand. Okay. So he should have already sent them to me. But now, as I go through the medical records, if I realize something's missing, like lab data from a couple of days that I know the patient was in the hospital, but suddenly there's no lab data for those days, I will tell him, you know, you need to go back and reorder this. And then there are sections that some hospitals just, because they don't know any better, sometimes they just leave out because they don't think it's important. But attorneys have been trained to know how to ask for medical records and what exactly to ask for. Now, if you're a new attorney and you're not sure what to ask for, and you want me to help you, then I will tell you what we need to ask for. Then you order all that, and then as soon as you get it, then you send me a copy,
and I'll get started on it.
All right, but you don't yourself, as the legal medical consultant, you don't have that power. It's not like, okay, Kathie's on the phone, that means we have to, you know, snap to it here at the hospital, get her everything, throw it up in the air, put it in the box, and let's go.
No, now, some attorneys will say, okay, this patient was in XYZ hospital.
Right.
Can you order the records for me?
Oh, you can do that. Okay.
Yes. And I'll say, okay, exactly what do you want?
Right.
Do you know exactly what you want? A lot of times they'll say, I'm not really sure.
Right.
Especially if they're still new and, you know, getting their feet wet in this medical malpractice or personal injury arena.
Right. All right. Well,
and so I'll tell them, you know, what I'm going to ask for, and they'll say, well, can you order them? Sure, that's not a problem. I have a form that I have to send to the client first, because they have to sign a form, and then they send that back to me, and then I start requesting the records.
Right. So there you have it, right there from the lips of our guest, Kathie Condon. She is the owner of Condon Medical Legal Consultants out of Birmingham, Alabama. But don't let that stop you from reaching out to her. She can work with you no matter where you're located in the United States or even Canada, right? Have you reached out to Canada?
I could work with an attorney in Canada. The rules are a little bit different up there, but that's what the internet's for me to research.
You just got to be careful because they talk a little funny up there.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, a little bit.
Nobody in the South talks funny.
Not at all.
No.
Again, reach out to Kathie directly. You can go to her website, cmlc.co, or call her by phone, 205-908-3289. Find out, especially if you're an attorney or maybe you're thinking about retaining an attorney and you're like, you know, let me discuss things. She can help point you in the right direction. Again, cmlc.co. That's the website for Condon Medical Legal Consultants, or give them a call, 205-908-3289. And as always, Kathie, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Rick. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, and I as well. It's always great to get all this information because you never know when it can come in handy.
Oh, yes, exactly. You never know.
Exactly. So thank you again.
Okay, thank you.
All right.